Hey there, everybody. Today on Founder Fridays, I'm joined by Rob Howard, the founder of Innovating with AI. Rob's on a mission to help entrepreneurs and business leaders integrate AI into their work through education, coaching, and a growing community. Rob, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Rob, I thought we could maybe start with your journey. What led you to founding Innovating with AI? What's some of your background?
Sure. So I have been a website developer and owned a variety of design agencies and web development firms for about 20 years, dating back to like first company out of college in like 2005-ish. I've actually been a coder for a lot longer than that. I learned to code at 12 and started doing internet fan sites and GeoCity stuff. And that kind of turned into like little businesses, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I really started in a place where I thought I was going to go into more like communications and journalism, but just by the nature of what was happening in the newspaper industry and the tech industry around that time in the early 2000s, everybody was like, hey, we can have you do publishing stuff, but we really need help with tech stuff, right? So started out as a hobby, really became a job. And I've built several companies since then. The one that I was operating and continue to operate, but with the big company that I've run in my career is Howard Development and Consulting, which is a web development and software development firm. And from that sprung the Innovating with AI company, which is more about technology education. So we've been doing tech education in a variety of ways for many years prior to ChatGPT hitting the scene. And at the time that, we kind of saw what was happening with AI and that first, November ChatGPT release, we were like, well, we're teaching people other tech skills. I think it's time for us to teach people AI skills. And that was, as you probably can imagine, very popular, much needed. And now that has evolved into what is a new brand and a new company in Innovating with AI.
That's amazing. And I know that it's the two branches, right? AI consulting and then also the incubator.
Yeah, correct. So we currently have two programs. So Innovating with AI is essentially an education company, right? What we do is we do have software developers with our, sort of legacy client service company who are still, fully operational, and that's a, bustling, profitable company. But we've branched off Innovating with AI to be about educating others, right? So we have two programs currently. One, as you mentioned, is called the Incubator. That's about lean product development in sort of the AI world and future-proofing yourself for, building stuff in a very different setting than what existed in kind of the traditional Silicon Valley days. And then our other program is called the AI Consultancy Project. And that is about training folks to provide consulting services to clients. So it's a mixture of AI skills, building, workflows and automations with no code and low code solutions, doing strategy sessions, doing trainings for clients. And that one's been super fun. We have over 900 students in that program right now. And they're crushing it. They're signing, $5,000 and $10,000 projects with clients and doing, trainings with 50 people showing up in person and stuff like that. So that's been super fun. And I think that one is the one that right now is just super accessible. Like if you're an AI enthusiast and you want to build a business around that enthusiasm and the fact that you're an early adopter, just being able to go into an organization like a, 5 to 50 person company or even a nonprofit and say, hey, we're going to train your staff. We're going to help you with your roadmap and strategy. We're going to build some stuff for you with low code, relatively easy to use but customized solutions. That's been a huge opportunity for tons of our Innovating with AI readers and the folks who are, now students in that program, just are seeing like crazy demand for that service, as you can probably imagine.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like AI consulting didn't really exist a few years ago, and now it's one of the fastest growing fields. I feel like it's a huge buzzword that everyone throws around. How do you define what good AI consulting looks like today, and where do you think this role is going to head next?
Yeah, great question. So we definitely differentiate from like the McKinsey consultants, right? Like I'm not training somebody to go work for like a big four consulting firm or even like 100-person consulting firm as like an analyst or an employee. I really look at it as an entrepreneurial experience. So you're likely either coming out of a full-time role at a company or you've done some freelancing in the past. Like we have a lot of folks who were freelance marketers or freelance web designers in the past who are now pivoting into AI consulting. So to me, it's really about building long-term relationships as a small business owner with other small to medium business owners. We have some folks who are doing enterprise stuff. We have kind of a separate branch of the program where we talk a lot about that. But to me, it's like there are so many 5 to 50 employee companies that need the help of someone who is effectively a trusted advisor to them. And one of the things that we've discovered, and every student who comes in is like, oh, am I good enough? Like there's so many smart people in AI, right? I don't know if I can really give people advice. And what they discover after a couple of weeks with us is they're actually in like the 95th or 99th percentile just by virtue of even being like subscribed to open tools, right? Or being reading these sort of constant breaking news articles about AI. So the average person and the average business owner, number one, is not as plugged in as the folks who are listening to this right now. And they're also balancing other responsibilities, right? So they don't have time to go like learn the no code tooling. They don't have time to compare Claude versus, GPT 4.0 or whatever else new thing is coming out, right? So because we are inherently enthusiasts, right? And there's this, kind of small but mighty group of AI enthusiasts. Those folks often don't realize how far ahead of the curve they really are because they are hanging out with other AI enthusiasts. And they're like, oh, this person knows machine learning and I don't, or this person writes Python and I don't. But in reality, like they're so far ahead of the curve that they're actually able to dive pretty quickly into delivering high value stuff to clients. And in the program, we have 3 pillars: AI skills, which is what you would guess, right? We really focus on low code stuff and no code stuff because we don't want you to have to be a programmer to get into this. But then the other 2 pillars are client skills, sales, lead generation, and consultancy skills, which is all about building a business you actually want to work in, right? So when you combine all those things and you combine this fact that we have, many thousands of early adopters, but it's not everyone in the world who's an early adopter, right? You have just a really cool opportunity to get ahead of the curve, establish yourself, and, like I was saying, score pretty big projects pretty quickly. And we have a lot of templates and, guides that you can use to sort of accelerate that. But one of the biggest things that people discover against their sort of assumptions is, wow, like I'm going into these companies and they're like so thankful that I know anything about AI because they know it's a stress point, they know it's a need, right? But they're like, we don't know this stuff. Like we're not the sort of tech obsessives or tech nerds, right? And we don't want to be. So we want to hire somebody who is, and that person can actually make quite a bit of money and really help those organizations.
No, I can relate completely. I feel when I first started within this industry, I had huge imposter syndrome. And
Yep.
very quickly, you come to realize that there's a massive gap of knowledge missing between maybe not necessarily the older generation, but I'm going to say the older generation who is still adapting to other technologies, and then the younger generation who has now been raised with this stuff or is more familiar with these products and using them in the day to day. And just that daily use can actually make you more of an expert than you think.
Yeah,
Actually,
totally.
the business leaders that you're working with currently, the people who come in to learn, what do you think the biggest thing holding these people back is from applying AI right now?
Yeah, great question. So one of the interesting things we've discovered actually is that, uh, you know, our courses are, positioned as very premium and hands-on. So I think that's probably part of it. But we actually see our students skewing older than you might expect in terms of their own age. If you look at like the surveys about AI usage, like there's a lot in the news right now about like every college student is using AI. And if you just read that, it's like, okay, well, AI is mostly 19-year-olds, right? But in reality, like we see tons of people who have established careers in their 40s, 50s, even 60s who are adding AI to their portfolio of services, or they're pivoting from one business to another, or moving out of a job into solopreneurship as an AI consultant. So we've been, I think if you looked at the high level statistics, you might be surprised by that, right? But the other thing that we've seen is that folks who have career experience already are really well positioned to now say, hey, I'm an expert in X, Y, and Z industry, and also an AI early adopter. So they're actually combining that. Their age is an asset, right? By nature of the fact that they've been in an industry for 10 or 20 or more years, right? So they're kind of like subject matter experts plus AI enthusiasts, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity there for folks who are farther along in their careers and their lives and want to kind of pivot or get into this. We see a lot of that. And then, of course, the folks who are younger and more sort of digital natives, you're always going to be the person people call for tech support, or the person who helps, the people around the office like fix stuff and connect stuff and all that. So, both of those groups, or both of those sort of age cohorts, actually have really interesting entry points into client services in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And dialing it back to your other offering, the AI incubator, can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that and how that has grown and the trajectory of where that's going as well?
Yeah, so that was basically one of our earlier programs that we released, and it's very much in the vein of like a lean startup, right? So there was a lot of people who were saying, hey, AI is a thing, software as a service is a thing. Maybe we can combine these things to make them super, profitable for us. The big sort of caveat that I give people in that program is you actually need to be way more lean than you needed to be even 5 or 3 years ago before the advent of AI, because number one, everything's moving so much faster, and number two, there's just such a low barrier to entry for building a piece of software today. Like, I have a lot of friends who are vibe coding now. Like, I've been a software developer for 20 years, but I'm like, you're building stuff in like a weekend that like would have taken me months if I had done it, as a quote unquote normal human coder a few years ago, right? And I have a lot of experience in this. So just, we talk a lot in that program about how the landscape has changed so much, and how to rethink what is essentially software product sales or software as a service sales, because it is so different today as a result of not only AI being a thing that you can talk to via an API and plug into, but also obviously AI powered software development is just a huge disruptor to the standard business model. There's very little moat now, where a company with like, in the past, a company might say, oh, we're going to go hire the 10 best engineers in California, and they'd actually have an advantage. That company really doesn't have an advantage now. They actually have way too much payroll, right? Compared to what a leaner sort of AI powered founder would do. And I think, there's definitely some senior engineers in the world who might disagree with that, or try to sort of hedge their bets against that. But I think what we're seeing in the wild is way more amateur software that is equal or better quality to, venture funded multi-million dollar builds that were taking place 5 years ago. So incubator is a lot about how to reposition and be lean and still launch something that is valuable to your customers. The other program that is coming out that's really going to be sort of a offshoot or third pillar of these other two is going to be more about agents. And if I'm an executive, or if I'm a employee at a company who wants to leverage my time or do more with less, right? How do I use agents, and how do I build my own stuff in a custom way that is better than off the shelf and still accessible and easy for me? So later in the summer, we're going to have a lot more about our agent building and executive program, which I'm really excited about.
That's amazing. I do feel like AI agents is another huge buzzword topic and a trend that the industry is moving in. When these trends happen, in terms of flexibility for your students, for your course products, for what you're teaching, how do you guys transition towards these new trends and make sure that you guys are capitalizing and teaching, especially as they emerge?
Yeah, great question. So, uh, although I am an early adopter of tech and I love new stuff, I am also, I think, relatively conservative in the way that I actually invest in a big way in new ideas. Because as you mentioned, there's so many flash in the pan buzzwords, right? Like many of our students say, "Hey, I could read this like newsfeed all day, and then I feel like I didn't do anything today." But like, there's like 9 billion new models that came out and all this stuff. So, uh, it's actually a pretty high bar for me to do a significant amount of new educational material about a topic. We really want to see proof that it's going to stick around. I think at this point, agents are that thing, but I think, 9 months ago, in mid to late 2024, I was not convinced that that new trend had like locked in quite yet, right? And I think that you could probably think of a number of examples where the trend kind of uh, came and went, right? So, and within AI and obviously all around software. One example is the pins, the handheld things. Like we kind of saw a bunch of those getting released. People were like, "This is changing everything." A lot of them were basically nothing burgers, if you will. But we'll see where that goes. But I don't think that's our 2025 like trend or anything that I'm not going to teach a course on that, right? So, we really have a high bar for what we teach. We put a ton of time and energy into our programs. We have hundreds and hundreds of hours of material in the consultancy program. We have a thousand plus people in our student community in Slack. So there's a lot that goes into it. And as a result, like I don't have any desire to do, you know, the flash in the pan $9 videos or the YouTube videos that, show you like, here's this amazing new trick that's going to save you 27 hours. Like we really avoid that stuff. Obviously those are fun to watch sometimes and you can pull some interesting nuggets out of them. But, we want to build stuff that is really holistic and can transform someone's life or career. And the bar for that is quite a bit higher. So one of the things we do is, we have 200,000 people on our Innovating with AI free newsletter, and we talk to them a lot, right? So I'm writing opinion and analysis, but I'm also saying, hey, fill out this survey. Tell me what your challenges are. Tell me what the thing you really need to learn is in the next 6 months. And, that gives us a lot of true data in terms of like, where is the premium high quality stuff versus the sort of flash in the pan stuff. And, we've had a lot of luck with that. And, we are able to basically propose ideas to 200,000 people and get real time feedback from them. And then, a portion of them become students and many of them stay on the list and, hang out and read our free stuff and get notified about the next thing. Right. So it's kind of a nice, almost symbiotic relationship between us as the educators and our student community, because the students are telling us collectively what they think matters. And then we're able to take that, combine it with our own skills and expertise in the software as well as the business world, and produce what we think is just really high quality premium stuff that, knocks all the sort of $9 courses and the, 20-minute, YouTube videos out of the park.
That's great. Yeah, I'm also a Innovating with AI newsletter subscriber. I think I've actually replied and you've replied to me personally, which is amazing. In terms of talking about trends and what's coming up next, what do you think about AI video? I feel like we hear that at terms a lot, and our last guest actually did a whole feature on it. So what do you think about AI video?
I think that's one of the big things that's going to really become accessible to everybody in the next year. So, it's mid 2025 right now. You can get good video models, but they're pretty costly, right? Like I think I paid $125 a month for the new Google VO3 model recently, and like it didn't even work half the time when I was using it. I eventually got it to work, but right now, we are, I think, at an inflection point where, if you look at VO3 and, Sora to some degree and some of the other less well known, but, high quality video models, like they're effectively indistinguishable from real life, especially like if it was like, hey, give me a video of two people doing a podcast, right? Something like that. Like you wouldn't really be able to put our video next to a VO video and really know with confidence which one was real and which one was AI. So they have reached an inflection point where the realism is so good as to effectively be impossible to differentiate, right? Unless, sometimes things end up weird or like there's like, a microphone hanging from your head or something, obviously. But anyway, the realism is amazing, especially if you do a couple of attempts. So I think what we're going to see is speed increase and costs go down over the next year. I think that's just naturally going to happen with pretty much every AI model because we know that those are limiting factors for standard users right now. And tooling improve so that you can easily produce multiple versions of a clip, longer clips, piece them together, put music behind them. Like you could see how something like a, Final Cut or Adobe Premiere could straightforwardly integrate more AI video features and clipping and stuff like that. So the result of that is it becomes easier to produce longer videos. It becomes easier to produce videos that are more consistent in terms of their look and feel, their audio. It becomes easier to split real video in with AI video and stuff like that. So, the degree to which this is going to affect the everyday person in their own AI usage may be relatively low. Like I'm not running around creating videos on a like regular basis, right? Except the stuff that like what we're recording today, maybe. But if you think about people who are producing advertising, dramatically improves, their productivity. Obviously, there's job threats there that need to be balanced. But it's I think indisputable that they will be able to produce equal quality work in less time, right? And then you take that up to, film, you take that up to television, YouTubers even, right? Like YouTube is basically the most watched form of video, like entertainment, like it's bigger than any TV station or any video, any movie, right? And there's a ton of just interesting opportunities there. And I think it's going to get better and better. And obviously, because of the realism of it, it introduces tons of kind of social questions and ethical questions around like, well, how do we know what's real and what's not, right? I will say that I think that we have not really seen a social meltdown yet as video and image AI has gotten better and better. So I think basically people have developed a pretty good BS detector for imagery that is generated by AI, and they're going to do the same in general for video. So, while there will be confusion and, unethical behavior as there always is, I think overall, it's just so impressive what's going on in the world of video that it's going to be very hard for people who touch video on a regular basis to resist using these tools, especially as they get better and better and faster and cheaper.
Okay. No, definitely. I feel like, especially as it becomes more accessible to more people, I think that is when we get closer to maybe that societal meltdown or that breaking point, and then we'll see what happens then. I don't know. But where do you think the AI consulting world is kind of headed next? As the space matures, as things become more available to everybody, and again, as this line between what we know now is like super professional AI and accessible to everybody AI is blurred.
Yeah, great question. So, what we've seen is that even if everything becomes more accessible, right, which we think is obviously going to be the trend, like, it's going to be, a little sidebar in Google or a little sidebar in Microsoft, and those sidebars are going to get smarter and smarter, right? What we're seeing in the consulting space is that trend is increasing awareness of AI among business owners who might hire consultants, which obviously is a good thing. What it is not really doing is causing them to go sign up for a bunch of different tools and experiment with them independently, right? And what we are seeing is that business owners still have 24 hours in their day, and they need to prioritize, and they need to decide where the opportunity cost is. Is it worth it for them to go spend 20 hours learning something that they may use once or they may not even like, right, in the end? Or is it better for them to spend $5,000 to hire a consultant who's done it 20 times for 20 other companies and can really just guide them through it, right? I think the general trend in all tech is ease of use increases over time. But what's not going to change is the limits around business owners investing their time or their employees' time in what are essentially ancillary efforts, right? They're not necessarily things that anybody at the company, if it's a non-tech company, really wants to do or is like super inspired to do. So there's a clear place for somebody who is a subject matter expert to come in for a one-off project or maybe a retainer or something like that. And everybody gets their money's worth and gets good value out of it. So the big trend is basically that we're only at the very beginning of mid-range adoption and late adoption, right? So if you think about, there's a graphic of like a tech adoption curve where we have early adopters, early majority, late majority, that sort of thing. The early adopters are folks who are basically thinking about doing client service consulting right now, and they have like an avalanche of later adopters coming in, and that avalanche has not come anywhere close to peaking at this point. So I think over the next couple of years, as AI becomes even more and more mainstream, you actually have more and more clients coming in because everybody needs to figure out not only how to build stuff, but like, what's my strategy? What are we going to do with my team? Because we need to redistribute their efforts to take into account the fact that some stuff is going to be a lot faster now, right? How are we going to grow? How are we going to be competitive? If our competitors are doing similar stuff, are they going to suddenly 10x their productivity, right? So there's a lot of these fascinating and challenging business questions that cannot be solved by like signing up for a $20 a month, AI writing service, right? Or a $20 a month, Gemini add-on or something like that to your existing tech, right? So there's a lot of implementation work, but there's also a lot of really big picture business challenges that people just need somebody who's AI savvy to help them navigate.
Of course. And it kind of brings it back to what you said about the subject matter expert plus the AI savviness mixed together. Now, Rob, I just want to be conscious of time and move into some questions. They're going to be a little bit of rapid fire, a little bit of founder ones that people love to hear. So, what's one daily habit or small routine that's helped you stay focused while building and scaling the company?
Yeah, great question. So I try to keep it super lean. I think we do a pretty good job of that. My favorite one, though, is my to-do list is a half sheet of paper, and I'm not allowed to have a to-do list that is bigger than that for the coming day. I also don't use digital to-do lists, right? I have a digital calendar, but if it's happening tomorrow, it is written on that half sheet of paper or quarter sheet of paper on my keyboard the night before, and I just show up to my home office and start working through the paper list. So that is my old school way of preventing overload in terms of my daily to-dos.
What's the most amount of tasks you can normally have on your to-do list?
Yeah, I mean, it only is, a few inches by a few inches. So you probably couldn't put more than 10 useful things on here. I try to keep it smaller than that. And I try to, at least knock one or two of them off before I even open email. So that way, starting my day with something that I have already prescribed as important, and I'm not just diving right into the vortex of, incoming information.
Awesome. I love that. And what's one AI tool that you couldn't live without right now?
So we really like Descript. We do a lot of video recording because we're doing weekly, multiple weekly recorded sessions for our students where it's a live Zoom, and then we record it and we incorporate it into our curriculum for, lifetime access for our students. So, I do at least 3 to 5 hours of basically webinars per week live, which we then record and clip and basically augment with Descript, which is an AI video editing tool. So they have really good transcription, and you can edit via text with the transcript, which is really simple for us. And their studio sound settings like make it so you basically don't need fancy microphones anymore, which is really awesome because if you even look back like 5 years, like the cost and complexity of producing a 30-minute recording that didn't sound like garbage was actually quite high, right? And now it's essentially effortless for anybody with a click of a button.
That's amazing. And just wrapping up, talking about the what's the best place for people to follow you and innovating with AI and what you guys are working on next.
Yeah. So just go to innovatingwithai.com. You'll see a way to sign up for our newsletter for free. And the newsletter is the only way that we publish or promote our programs. So you'll get lots of free analysis and insights from me and my team. And then periodically we'll do enrollment cycles, which usually last about a week at a time for our programs. So that's the way to get notified of our next enrollment cycle for, each of the things we talked about and the new stuff that's coming out later in the summer.
Amazing. Well, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, I'll have to check in on your newsletter. I'll subscribe or make sure that I'm resubscribed. And thank you so much again.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks for having me.